If you're a Walgreens employee, I hope you like Microsoft Office.
Yep.
Let's just end it there. See you later. Catch you tomorrow.
Good night, everybody.
Kicking off the show with whatever Microsoft announced today. It was actually they're announcing that they're working with Walgreens and that whole company and everything else, and they're moving them to Microsoft 365, which is conveniently because we wrote up some stuff about that today on both Petri and Thurat, which you can go check out. But the real story here is that Microsoft sold 380,000 seats of Microsoft 365. I think they might make some money from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder how that works. I assume volume licensing applies and whatnot, but yeah.
I would think volume applies at 380,000, I would hope.
Yeah, this is the thing. I remember when Office 365 was just starting to pick up some steam, and it was like, Microsoft every quarter would brag, like we have 100 million, enterprise seats or whatever, the commercial seats. We have 100 million, whatever it is, active users on consumer. And I would think, those are good numbers, but they kind of pale in comparison to like the installed base of like traditional Office, right? So
yeah,
like when does that start to make sense? But I was talking to someone, actually, I don't remember if there was someone from Microsoft or not, but I was having a conversation with somebody about this. And what kind of came up during the conversation was like the beauty of this revenue is it's recurring, right? So if you sell someone a copy of Microsoft Office, or if you sell sell a PC and it includes Windows, so you've effectively bought a copy of Windows, that thing only occurs on that one device. That's it. You don't get to move it anywhere else or use it in multiple places. And it is something that will only generate revenues at one time. And then maybe sometime down the road, it used to be every 3 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10, whatever it is, maybe they'll buy another one. And that's not very regular,
Right.
So the beauty of this system is that Microsoft gets regular revenue from it. That's the nature of volume licensing. It's essentially a subscription. They get more, like you wrote about this today, about the modern desktop. They get more revenue on a regular basis ongoing if you're licensing them Office, the Intune management capabilities, et cetera. And it's a win-win because this is better for consumers too. You get to use users, right? You get to use this stuff on any number of PCs, really. I mean, how many are you going to have? But it's basically infinite from most people's perspective. Mobile devices as well. Multiple people in a family, if you're getting the consumer version. And it's being upgraded like all the time with new features. Like it's not sitting still like Office always used to. Like if you bought Office 2010, it didn't matter that 2013, 2017, whatever the versions were. Actually, those are wrong. Doesn't matter. I don't even remember the Office versions. 2016, I think, was the last one. 2019 now. It doesn't matter that those things arrived. You don't benefit from them as a purchaser of what is now called the perpetual version of Microsoft Office 2010. And I think that this is the cool thing about it. So, this is a huge win for Microsoft, but it's also a huge win for all those people that will be using the software. And I think that's why it's beautiful. It's not a one-sided deal.
Yeah, and to your point, cash flow is king. So this is going to help Microsoft's cash flow statement by leaps and bounds. I mean, that's a healthy deal. I wonder whoever landed that at Microsoft is probably had a nice Christmas, I would think.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of these kinds of announcements that we already have, right? I mean, this is kind of one in a series of ongoing things that happens for Microsoft. It explains why they're one of the most valuable companies in the world and all that kind of stuff. But of course, in our world, I always think about this from the perspective of people, consumers, individuals, whatever, personal computing. And for the past, 6 months or so, there's been this growing call for, does a Microsoft Office for consumers make sense? What would that entail? And, it kind of occurred to me that we might be looking at it from the wrong angle. Like a lot of, it's natural to say, well, okay, Office 365 would be part of it. Maybe there'd be some kind of PC management stuff going on. Would Xbox be included, And yeah, okay, that's an interesting conversation. But I think the bigger deal is like, at least for me, there's some stuff about Windows 10 that's pretty crappy these days, like the advertising that's in Windows 10, the crapware that's in Windows 10, the data collection that you can't turn off in Windows 10, and also the 2 feature updates every year that you can do nothing. Well, actually, if you're a pro user, you can do some things about it, but you can basically, most home users can't do anything to defer or delay these upgrades. Mm-hmm. And I find that to be problematic. Obviously, I've written a ton about it, but what if Microsoft 365 fixed that stuff, right? Once you're on a paying program, once you're subscribing, once you're treating Windows like you do Office 365, you're getting something in return for something, right? That's where the additional features come from. That's where the ability not to have crapware, and not to have ads, and not to have automatic data collection on everything. Maybe that's what makes sense. Like, would people pay for that plus get Office 365? I mean, I would, and I'm already paying for Office 365. I mean, how much more would it have to be for that to make a ton of sense?
Yep. Yeah. So this will be interesting to watch. Other things that are interesting to watch. I don't know if you saw this yet, Paul. The reason why we are donning the red Microsoft thing back here. If you're familiar with the site Buildfeed, which, as the name suggested, kicked out feeds of Windows 10 builds, over the weekend they dumped a whole bunch of strings that they shouldn't have, and now that site is dead. As Paul chucks a cat out of the room.
I wasn't throwing a cat across the room. What do you mean?
But
it's here, it hit a wall. And
yeah, so the feed that Buildfeed was using kicked out a bunch of stuff that talked about some internal things at Microsoft that shouldn't have been known publicly. Yeah. And Microsoft Security has isolated the incident, and now that site is dead, and I believe the feed is dead. And
I think they kind of agreed to shut it down, didn't they? Didn't Microsoft Legal kind of give them a little slappy?
Agreed is a funny term, right? If they show up with bats knocking on your door, it's like, hey, you gonna stop that? Oh yeah.
This used to be, some of my earliest days blogging, and a lot of the friendships I still have today, like Stephen Bink, who used to run, it's probably still there, but bink.nu had purchased the Windows XP domain for the Netherlands, for example. So he pointed it at his site. And then there was like Bob Stein from ActiveWin. And of course, my site at the time was the super site for Windows, which started as the Windows super site. Microsoft Legal approached me and said, look, we can't really prevent you from using the name Windows in the name, but we can prevent you from making it first. So you have to change the name of the site. And so I changed it to the super site for Windows, right? That's how that came about. But the URL, when you think about it, was Win super site, right? ActiveWin had faced a similar problem. I believe they had to change their name. And then Stephen Bank was legally threatened by Microsoft, and that's how I met him. He came to me for advice about how to handle this, and he eventually, I think he was able to sell it back. I don't remember if he sold it or gave it back to Microsoft, but that was like the type of thing that was going on back then. That kind of settled down, over time. Sites that came along like NeoWin or sites that have like Win in the name, over time, having the Windows name first became a non-issue, for whatever reason. But I can say from experience, because I had my early experience was when in fact, my first, how do I say this? My first direct personal experience dealing with Microsoft was when they legally threatened me because, and this would have been 1995, 96, somewhere in there, where I had an indirect relationship with Microsoft because I was writing books about Microsoft technologies, but we were on like a beta program that was through the publisher. It wasn't something I had achieved, gotten myself. But I went to, actually it was the show, it would have been the show where I saw Joe Belfiore for the first time, where he was showing off how IE was going to implement frames, which, is like 2 million years ago. I know. So all very exciting. And anyway, it's somewhere during the show, they talked about like, well, here's what the IE toolbar looks like now. It looked like the Windows Explorer toolbar. It had boxes around each of the buttons. And they said, we're going to streamline this and make it look really modern. And we're going to make IE and the File Explorer share the UI. So it will be browsing the web will just be like browsing your files, which, as everyone knows, makes total sense. Given that, I took a picture of the browser, and then I just erased the lines around the boxes. And I said, this is what the next version of Internet Explorer is going to look like. And then Microsoft sued me because they thought I had stolen it. And I wrote the guy back and I said, you described what it looked like. I drew this myself.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." He's like, "Do you want to be on the beta?" I'm like, "Yeah." And that's kind of how it started.
Could you
Kind of
call
a
off the
goofy.
dogs first? I mean, that's
Yeah. It was like it's so appropriate that this relationship started with a legal threat.
yeah, all good things do, right? They all. Yeah, that's
It's a long time ago.
yeah, yeah. So that's kind of the news of the day. You got anything else going on today, Paul? It's been
Nothing going on today.
I know
It's like it's so dead this week. Like, I don't know. I crank out like a single article every morning. It's just it's like bleeding a stone. I don't know what's going on. I can write. I mean, I have mornings where I write 5,000 to 8,000 words. Like, I can go to town, and it's not been like that this week. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's
Rightus interruptus. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting old. It happens to everybody, Brad. I don't know.
It's I'm waiting here because Paul and I have talked about this. I'll just mention it on the air that we've talked about this many times, doing commentary for the book, and we talked about offline possibly doing it this week. There's something I'm waiting for though. Is the audiobook is done.
Oh, who did the audiobook?
Well, I can tell you his name. I actually used a service which was recommended to me by a reader called acx.com, which basically what you do is you put out like 2 chapters, and then a whole bunch of people audition for it, and then you just pick someone.
Oh, that's awesome! And you actually get to. I hope it's like the guy. Like, he sounds like the guy who's like, in a world in which
which they do have people like it's really it's a fascinating service because you can pick all sorts of different stuff. Like you can pick, like, are they Midwestern, are they Boston, are they African, are they European, or whatever, and you get tons of stuff. So it was really interesting. I picked like a guy that's kind of like generic American voice because I didn't think like West Virginia voice was appropriate for reading about this. Anyway, so it's done. And then what you have to do is you approve it, and then you have to wait 7 to 10 business days for the publishing platform to then approve what I've approved, and then it gets distributed to like iTunes, Audible, and all that stuff. And so I don't want to start doing the commentary until that's available because I really don't want to get any more emails about when is this thing going to be available on audiobook because I've gotten quite a few.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. I wasn't aware that you were doing that. That's really neat.
Yeah, it was just.
Or if I was, I forgot it.
It was honestly, I thought about just doing it, like reading it, but then like looking at what's involved, and it was like I could spend a couple $100.
Do you have any idea how long it would take? It's not just the act of reading the book out loud would be X number of hours, but it doesn't go like that. You have to do them in chunks, and you have to redo bits, and you have to go and edit it, and it would be tough. I mean, I think the thing I had said, I think, in fact, this might have led to the idea of the commentary, was one of the audiobooks I kind of enjoyed, but there was a segment I really enjoyed, was David Cross, the comedian and actor. He wrote a book called something like, This Is Why I Drink, or something to that. It was something like that. And one of the great stories he tells in the book is about the Jim Belushi, right? Jim Belushi, who he calls the Belush, who's a terrible human being. He kind of rips into him a lot. But one of the things he does in this book that I thought was so genius was he reads the book, right, as you would. You have to literally read it word for word. But then he will pause from time to time and say, go off on this little story that's kind of about the story he's reading, but it's not in the actual book. And I have to say, I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And and I thought I think that would, the idea of a commentary, which is what we're calling it, I guess, is a good one. It's kind of a neat, it's like additional context or framing or whatever. It's a good idea.
What I really was trying to figure out is how can I talk to Paul throughout more?
Yes.
And right. I think we've accomplished that.
Yep.
So once that audiobook gets approved, then we will start rocking and rolling on that. It shouldn't be it's for those curious, a couple of things. One, it's going to be video. It's going to be for the premium subscribers, and there's going to be no RSS feed. We're not going down that route again. That was a pain in the ass of 700 people emailing us every day saying, I can't authenticate. And So my recommendation is you hit play, you minimize the browser window, and then you go about your task.
Yep. No, that's good. Yeah. This will be like the next cereal or whatever. It will be I don't mean like breakfast cereal. I mean like the popular podcast in cereal form.
We're just going to call it Cocoa Crisps. That's going to be
the greatest name in baseball.
All right, folks. Well, that wraps it up for today. We will be back tomorrow with whatever's happening or not happening or should be happening. And have yourselves a wonderful day.